Okay, continuing on with our introduction to the Cinema 4D interface. Like I said in the previous video, this large area where you'll be modeling all your objects is called the viewport. There are several, sections, but I'm going to cover two of them in this video. This one over here, this large area at the top upper right, is called the object manager. And then I'm going to talk about this area below it called the attribute manager. Okay, so the object manager, as you create objects, they will be listed here in the object manager. So like right now we have cube, and if I hit the drop down menu for the primitive objects, and I choose, for example, a cone and pull that over, so now the cone is in the object manager. Everything that's in your world will be listed here in the object manager, and it's a good idea, even though you can select objects on the screen, to get used to selecting objects within the object manager, because it's more precise and you know exactly what's happening. Your models will become very complex, and you're going to have a lot of objects in your world, and it's just easier to navigate through the object manager. But that being said, you can always select objects on the fly in your viewport. The object manager has three columns, which I'm not going to get into a whole lot, but the first column is the objects, and all the objects are listed. This middle column is called the status column, and what the heck is that? The status column has this green check mark next to each object. If I disable the green check, the object is no longer visible in the viewport. The object is not deleted, it's just not visible. And this, you will use this when you want to concentrate on one object. You'll have perhaps you might have densely packed objects that you're modeling, and you want to only focus on one and make sure you're working on it, and so on and so on. Within the status column, there's these two radio buttons, which I'm not going to explain right now. They have to do with whether they show up in the render or not. So that's down the road. Don't worry about that. Just know that the green check mark will not delete the object, but we'll just disable the view of the object in the viewport. The last large column here is called the tags column. And what the heck is a tag? I'll get into that later. Right now, every primitive object that you bring in has this Fong tag. And what the heck is a Fong tag? The Fong tag it means the method that which the objects that we're looking at on the screen is shaded. So just Fong has to do with how the objects are shaded to represent a three-dimensional form. And farther to the right on the object manager, for now, just realize that there are several tabs in the object manager, and for right now, only the objects tab should be enabled, and that's the default. In the object manager, you can select, I said you can select stuff, and you can also, if you double click, you can rename the objects. And also I can select an object and I can delete it just by hitting the delete key on the keyboard, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to delete my cone, and there's only my cube there. Let me select my cube again, and let's talk about the third chunk of the interface. It's the attribute manager, and it's a big deal. So like if we go down to the attribute manager, the object is selected. We can see the object properties. Again, there are numerous tabs here. Let me just scroll through them. The basic tab, it's a cube. It's visible in editor. It's visible in the renderer, meaning we can take a picture of it. There's no color. We can just keep for this course, keep the color at the default. Don't mess around with that. There's the coordinates tab, and it tells you where it is in the world. And there's, I was going to talk about these first two columns. The XYZ, first of all, you can see it's 0, 0, 0. So everything that we create in, in Cinema 4D will come in at the 0, 0, 0 location. So there's our cube at 0, 0, 0. Now if I grab the x-axis and pull it, you can see that the x value changes. And that's the same with, I can do the same with the y or the z. I'm going to command, I could do, okay, so like I changed it to this goofball number here. I could select that and zero it out, just hit 0 on the keyboard, hit return, and the cube is now at the 0, 0, 0 location. The units by default are centimeters. It really doesn't matter. You could change those units in the preference. For this course, keep them in centimeters just so we can all communicate with each other. But these are just relative values. It could say miles, for example, and it would just be this unit of measure is just to measure the relative size between objects or sides and diameters and so on. But the default is centimeters. It works very well. There might be some applications when you really get into this. For example, if you're doing an architectural rendering from floor plans, you might want to change it to feet and inches, if you're, to make it work. So anyway, that's the coordinates. That shows you where the location, where the object is located in this three-dimensional world in the viewport. The next column over is scale, and for right now, let's not mess with that. When we're modeling objects, there's rarely a use for this. For animation, you can do some really interesting things with scale, but it just changes the scale of the side. So, for example, I'll back up here. Let's say I increase the scale of the y value to 2. Hit return, and so now the along the y-axis, it's the relative scale is twice as much as the other axes. Okay. However, let's not go there. There's some wonky things that can happen when we start messing with the scale. So in our introductory course, just deal with the coordinates here, and we'll be doing that a lot, adjusting coordinates of the location of the object. The object properties tab, and again, this is all in the attribute manager, remember. This shows the the X, Y, and Z size of the cube that we brought in. So let me just, as an example, let me bring in a cylinder and show that, and you can see that the cylinder has a different, set of parameters: radius, height segments. And let me select the cube in the object manager, and then you can see the cube is very cube-like, 200 centimeters. It doesn't have a radius, etc., etc. What did I want to say here about the... there was something that slipped my mind. Oh, just so you know, you want to impress people at parties, these objects that we bring in from this menu are called parametric primitives. Parametric is a fancy sounding word. It just means that it has parameters. Here's the cone. It's got a top radius. These are all the parameters for the cone. So parametric means it has parameters. And they're primitive objects because all we can do is adjust these few parameters. Right now we can't just by themselves, just by manipulating the points and the edges and planes of these objects. We can't deform them or twist them or do anything with them unless we use some more advanced tools down the road. But so yeah, so that's about all I wanted to say about that. These are parametric objects, meaning that they're defined by the specific parameters for the object. And finally, we got our happy little Fong tab here. This just has to do with how the object is shaded to represent a three-dimensional object. And over on the right, just like in the Object Manager, we have an Attributes tab and a Layers tab. A Layers tab we will use eventually in very complex projects. And it has mostly to do with organization and selection ability, that kind of stuff. Don't worry about the Layers tab. Keep it on the Attributes tab. And that's about it. So in summary, two very important areas. Oh, I got to talk about one more thing about the Attributes tab. Nearly forgot. So if I choose I'm going to choose a scale tool. Okay, the Attributes tab will show you the attributes of both an object and a tool. Okay, so if I select a tool, okay, here's the attributes of the scale tool, and I'm not going to get into these right now. It just shows you that with the tools that we choose, we have a lot of control over how those tools can behave. So let me pick the Rotate tool, and sure enough, over in the Attribute tab, here's the attributes of the Rotate tool. So I'm telling you this because if you get confused, you'll say like, well, okay, let me check out I want to see the size of my cube. And you look over, you got the cube looks like it's selected, and you go over here, what the heck is going on here? Where's my cube? I'll simply just select the cube again in the Object Manager, and you're back in business. Okay, so to the last item that you choose will show up in the Attribute Manager, whether it's an object or a tool. Okay, so that's all. That's what I want you to remember about the Attribute Manager. It shows attributes both of tools and objects. The last selected item is presented in the Attribute Manager. And finally, remember that the Object Manager is a big deal. You'll be spending a lot of your time up here as you interface with Cinema 4D. This is the best place where you can locate and select your objects. So we've covered three major chunks of the interface: Viewport, Object Manager, and Attribute Manager.